Welcome, good evening. Welcome to the Pleasantville Village Board meeting of November 9, 2009. If you're watching live November 9, 2009, either on cable TV or at PCTV76.org, we encourage you to call in with any comments or questions you might have. Our call-in number is 769-1677. So again, if you're watching live Monday, November 9, please call in. Our next scheduled meeting is a work session on Monday, November 16 at 7 p.m. and then we have a regular meeting Monday, November 23rd at 8 p.m. with a work session at 7 p.m. Worth noting that that meeting on November 23rd is our annual youth recognition night, and so that's a night when we have an opportunity to honor the youth of the community who have contributed in various volunteer capacities, and it's a great evening, and we encourage you to come or tune in. So again, 769-1677 if you have any questions. The primary focus of the first part of our meeting is going to be the report on the audit, but had a few announcements I wanted to make before we did that. And the first is that all of us on the board yesterday received calls from residents who were wandering around at Nanahagan Park to report that Con Edison's tree subcontractor was in the process of clear-cutting trees at Nanahagan Park. And a number of us jumped in the car and ran up there. And what we witnessed was, I think it would be fair to describe as devastation of the trees on the north side of the pond. That would be the side adjacent to the high-tension power lines. I stopped the work. It was not the easiest process in the world even to make that happen. However, a tremendous number of trees had already been taken down, and at this point in time there are really almost no trees at all on that side of the pond. We were in touch with the village staff and convened a meeting this morning with representatives from Con Ed, both their operations department that does this work and their public affairs department, and we met on the site and described to them, and I think what could be characterized as unvarnished terms, our opinion about the work that was done, and certainly the communications process by which it happened. Among other things, this was work that we had no reason to think was going to happen. We were aware that Con Ed was doing some work on the aqueduct right-of-way, but certainly had not been made aware of the fact that they'd be working adjacent to our park, had no reason to think that the work would be at the scale it was, and lastly had no reason to think it would be going on a Sunday when we were least equipped to respond in a timely manner. So I will say that Con Edison arrived today and we had a lively discussion, and they have agreed that as of the moment, until further notice, they will do no further work along the aqueduct right-of-way until we come to an agreement about how it will be done going forward. They have asserted to us that they have the right to do this, that the work they were doing, in their view, is on New York City property owned by the aqueduct right-of-way. Whether or not that turns out to be 100% true remains to be seen. But they also assert that they are required to do this clear-cutting work based on mandates from the federal government and the state government. I can tell you what many residents already know, and that is that a reasonable person standing in Nanahagan Park cannot divine a single threat to the high-tension power lines by any number of the things that were cut down yesterday. Just a remarkable scene of destruction, and I can tell you it took me quite some time when I got home last night to recover my equanimity, having seen how quickly the work that so many village residents over several generations have worked to create and preserve, to have these guys come in here and cut this way was shocking, to say the least. So Con Edison called me back tonight at about 6 o'clock. They had evidently discussed this further at the councils of power at their end, and we will be convening again in a few days to discuss it further. But as of the moment, no further work is going on. I will say they made clear that at the time that I stopped the work yesterday, they weren't finished, and they do believe that they have a mandate from the federal government and the state government to come back and cut more. So a shocking, frustrating, difficult day, and I thank all of my colleagues. Many of us ran up there and we're also there today. So we will report to you what happens going forward, but quite a difficult day. Anyone want to add anything to that? On a brighter note, I'm happy to report a lot of you were also a week ago at the Ragamuffin Parade, which is one of the great events in the village of Pleasantville when ghosts and goblins take over Bedford Road and don't give it back for a while. It was a great event, and thanks a lot to the Department of Recreation, which puts it all together, to the Parks Department, which made possible a lot of arrangements for it, to the village staff, and to the police department, which got hit with sort of a trifecta that day with Bedford Road closed and zillions of kids walking down the street in costumes at the same time as a playoff football game was occurring at Parkway Field and had to be managed, all segueing into Halloween night being on a Saturday night when lots of people have lots of time in order to be Halloweenish. So thanks to the community for all their support of those events. Thanks to the community and the kids for a relatively quiet Halloween night. Hope everybody had a good time.
Because of the Yankees, that's why.
I've just been talking this long, waiting for Mindy to have an opportunity to mention the Yankees.
Come on, Sam. You can't be a Yankee hater, too. Jealous.
I want to also mention, Mindy has mentioned Sam Barron. Many of you may know Sam Barron as a resident of Pleasantville who grew up here and went to the Pleasantville schools. He is now our local reporter for the Examiner News, and it's worth mentioning tonight that we've been waiting with bated breath for the televising of 5 episodes of Sam Barron appearing on Deal No Deal, and we've been plying him with questions about whether he won or not. He's contractually obligated not to say. We now know that 2 episodes have aired, and he didn't win on those 2. There are 3 more to see, so I encourage you, any of you who are fans of Sam Barron or Deal No Deal, to keep your eye out for the remaining 3 sessions, and then thereafter, presumably, for the multi-part story in the Examiner.
I was thinking if he won, he'd have a new pair of pants on. But seeing that he doesn't, I'm kind of questioning
Yeah,
the
we've been
outcome
looking
there.
for signals.
He wears shorts all winter.
I know he does. That's why I'm saying. I thought maybe he'd buy a pair of
We've
pants.
been looking for a shiny Jaguar.
Buy a new quarterback.
You leave my Chad Henne alone.
All right. Well, now we're back to weightier matters.
I just wanted to say, I got to, you're talking about Halloween, I got to attend the senior celebration of Halloween on the luncheon on Friday the 30th, which was very festive, and they had a lot of great costumes at the luncheon and prizes and games, and we had so much fun. That is the best group of people to have lunch with. So as well as our Ragamuffin Parade, on the other end of it, our seniors were just as festive on the day before.
One more note for those who may be watching and who might be interested in volunteering. On Saturday morning, the board went on a walkabout with the Parks and Rec Advisory Board to all of our parks and fields so that we could look at all of our recreational resources all at once. It was an illuminating and useful day, and it's a good opportunity to remind the public that there are currently 2 openings on the Parks and Rec Advisory Board, and anyone who might be interested in serving on that board is encouraged to let us know here at Village Hall. You can call Patty Dwyer or Judy Weintraub at Village Hall, or drop by an email or a letter or resume, whatever it might be, to let us know of your interest on the Parks and Rec Advisory Board. So I thank you for
They
that.
meet once a month, and there's seven members, right?
Yeah, it's a 7-member board. We currently have 5 and are seeking to fill 2 open spots. So, the village's fiscal year runs from June 1 to May 31, and we are now in possession of the audit for the year that ended May 31, 2009. So let me introduce Mary Schwartz, who's the village treasurer, and she can lead us through this process and introduce the rest of the team.
Good evening. It's a pleasure to be here tonight. I'd like to first take a moment and say that our finance department has a great team, and we will work together to get the best result for the village. And Pam Hoffman, deputy treasurer, is here tonight. And we have our auditors from Bennett, Gilson, Storch, DeSantis Division of O'Connor, Davies, Munns, and Dobbins. And we have Scott Ulling and Rob Danielle, and they're going to take us through the first presentation on the audit of 2009.
Thank you, Mary.
Good evening, everybody. Here to present, as you said, the results of the annual external audit for the year ended May 31st, 2009. We've issued what's known as an unqualified opinion or a clean opinion on the village's financial statements. That appears right after the table of contents in the audit report. And basically a clean opinion basically says that we believe that these financial statements fairly present the results of operations for the village for the year ended May 31st, 2009. Now, the village operates a variety of funds. I'm going to focus my few minutes tonight on the general fund, which is the primary operating fund of the village. But you do operate other funds. You have a water fund that obviously accounts for your water activities. You have a debt service fund that accounts for your principal and interest payments on your borrowed monies. Capital projects fund utilized to account for the various construction projects that the village undertakes during the year. You have a refuse fund, self-explanatory. You have a pool fund, operates and accounts for the operations of the pool, and a special purpose fund. Anytime the village receives donations to be used for a certain purpose would be accounted for in this special purpose fund. But as I said, I'm just going to focus my few minutes on the general fund, and then of course I'll take any questions that anybody might have. The general fund income statement appears on page 44 of the bound audit document. And page 44 is presented in columnar format. And the first column is the original budget column. So that's the budget that would have been approved by the Board of Trustees back in the spring of 2008 for your operations for the 8-9 fiscal year. And you see the top part of the page gives you your revenue sources that were going to be used to support your operations. Obviously, the primary revenue source is the real property tax levy at $8.6 million estimated originally. You see non-property taxes at $1.1 million. Primarily, that's the sales tax distribution that you receive from Westchester County each quarter. Departmental income of $926,000 are the various fees that, parks fees, parking fees, those kinds of things are accounted for within departmental income. Fines and forfeitures are the court activities, $300,000. And state aid, you see $248,000. Most of that is from the mortgage tax distribution that you receive from the county. So you see that revenues were estimated at $11.7 million in total. In the middle part of the page are your expenditure areas in summary form. I should have mentioned that more detailed information on these numbers that I'm going through begins on page 46 and continues through page 51. These are summarization of those figures. So in the middle of the page, you see total expenditures were originally estimated at just over $11 million, and you see about 5 or 6 categories: general government support, or the administrative functions of the village, buildings, the business office, those kinds of things. Public safety is obviously the police department. Transportation is your highway maintenance functions. Culture and rec, recreational functions for the village. And then employee benefits, you see at $2.4 million. Those are the benefits that you provide either legally or contractually to all your employees. Primarily, it's contributions to the employees and police retirement systems that you have to make to the state, health insurance, and your share of Social Security costs. So the expenses, you can see, $11 million. Then you get into this other financing sources and uses group towards the bottom of the page. You see a positive $350,000. That's money that gets transferred from these other funds that I mentioned when I opened, some money coming back from the water fund, from its operations, and from the debt service fund to offset some of your debt service obligations. And then there are transfers out of $1.6 million, primary of which is the money that is then sent over to the debt service fund to fund your principal and interest obligations on your borrowed monies. So when you come down in that first column and you see a bracketed $676,000 there at the bottom. And that means when the budget was adopted, you expected the expenditures to be greater than the revenues by $676,000. That's why it's a bracket. But then you see that we use fund balance of $676,000 to balance the budget and come to zero. Because legally, under New York State law, you must adopt a balanced budget. So you used previously accumulated surpluses and essentially gave this money back in property tax relief in the 8-9 fiscal year. And that's how you come down to a balanced budget. The second column is the final budget. So things change during the year, and you make adjustments to the budget. And you could see that the total revenue estimate was modified by about $100,000 up to $11.8 million. Obviously, certain things came in, maybe certain grants came in. There was a federal grant that came in, for instance. So you amend the budget, you increase your revenue estimate, and you also increase your appropriation side so you could spend the money for the purpose of that grant. So you could also see in the middle section on the expenditures that the expenditure revision also occurred, raising the expenditure level to $11.1 million in the middle. You'll see changes, though, within each of those categories of expenditures, because in addition to the budget amendment, the business office would have come to you during the year and asked for possibly budget transfers for you to approve moving money from one appropriation account to another as your needs change during the year. So when you come down in the second column, you also see that you come down to the $676,000 bracketed figure, and again, keeping the budget in balance was utilizing that $676,000. The third column is what actually happened. So the first two columns was what the plan was, and the third column is what actually happened. And you could see in the top part that total revenues came in at $11.9 million, or in the aggregate about $130,000 better than budget. But there is some stories within that total. Sales tax distribution from the county came in less than last year by about $80,000 or $90,000, as everybody was experiencing a drop in sales tax. Within the state aid category, as I mentioned earlier, it includes mortgage tax. Mortgage tax, obviously everybody's heard all the stories this last year. It's down about 40% or so from the previous year. So that was a shortfall that nobody could have anticipated when this budget was adopted back in the spring of 2008. The other shortfall would have occurred in the use of money and property line, which is interest earnings. We all know what's happened with interest rates since last fall. They're practically zero or close to zero. So you didn't achieve your interest earning estimate. But overall, still, with all that, you still came in about $130,000 to the good on the revenue side of the budget. On the expenditure side of the budget, you see that the variance, the total expenditures came in at $10.5 million, so the variance in the fourth column there was $593,000. That means you underspent the appropriation side of the budget by about $600,000, pretty consistent with your operations from a year ago on page 45. If you look at the same line across, it basically came in the same way. So it means you managed the budget very well, and you were able to generate savings that will ultimately go to help replenish your fund balance. So when you come down in the actual column, and you're at the third number up from the bottom, when you take what the actual revenues were and what your actual expenditures were, you see the third number up is a bracketed $22,000. So essentially, you almost broke even for the year. You came out negative by about $22,000. But when you compare it to the budget, where you anticipated using $676,000 of your fund balance or your savings, you only had to dip into it by $22,000. So that's why the variance column on that line is a positive $654,000. You did $654,000 better than budget. So the $22,000 reduction to your fund balance, as you recall, you started the year, as you could see, with $3.3 million in total fund balance. So your fund balance, as you could see, was reduced to just under $3.3 million, $3,298,000. If you go back to page 43, yes, 43, and I'll take any questions, I just have like 2 more minutes left. You see that the $3,298,000 is the second number up from the bottom, and fund balance is just the difference between your assets and your liabilities. In governmental accounting, you'll notice that this balance sheet would not look like a regular business's balance sheet, because on a regular business's balance sheet, you will see long-term assets like capital assets like buildings and machinery and equipment, all those kinds of things. You don't see those on the sheet. You also don't see your long-term debt, all your borrowed monies, because under governmental accounting, we use what's called a modified accrual basis, and it's really just a current asset, current liability presentation. Those other items are elsewhere in the report. But as you can see, your total assets up top total $3.9 million this year, mostly, as you could see, in the form of cash, $3.4 million. So that's always a good thing. I would want to point out, you see the investment number is significantly down from last year. Investments is a little bit of a misnomer, but we have to call it that. Investments, you're only allowed to be in very conservative type investments, U.S. Treasury type things. This is a...
By state law.
By state law. You can't be in stocks, hedge funds, mutual funds, all that stuff that got everybody in trouble. The flip side is, as I mentioned earlier, you get no interest and very low interest rates. But it's all secure, all this money in your banks. They're all in FDIC insured commercial banks. You're not allowed to be in savings and loans. And any monies that you have at these institutions that are in excess of the FDIC limits, they have to post collateral against those deposits in excess of FDIC. So it's 100% secure, the cash investments. Your liability section you see in the bottom third of the page there is a $640,000 in various liability accounts, one being the amounts due to the retirement system. That's what you owe the employees' retirement system and the police retirement system for April and May. The retirement system is run on the state fiscal year, which is March, so we have to pick up the April and May, which you will pay to them actually later this year, but it's part of your fiscal year. One thing to note in there, and I'm sure Patty has advised you on all this going forward, is the state has come out with the rates for the employees' retirement system and the police retirement system for next year, and we're looking at about a 60% increase, 60% increase in the contribution rates, which will amount to several $100,000 for this village. And that will have to be planned for it when you go into your budget deliberations for the 10-11 budget, getting my years right. So, that's certainly something that you do have to keep an eye on. So when you take those liabilities of 640 off of those assets of 39, that's how we get to the 32 in fund balance. 4,900 of that fund balance is just set aside for prepaid expenses, which just matches the number up top. It was cash that was paid out prior to the end of the fiscal year, but it benefits the next period, so we take out of fund balance the cash that's already out the door. Also of note here is you designated $230,000 to balance the 9-10 budget that you're currently in, so essentially what you gave back in property tax relief. And last year, as I mentioned, and you look over in the 08 column, was that $676,000 number that we saw on the previous page. So you gave back less this year, but always remember that when you give back in property tax relief and designate fund balance like this, it's essentially a one-shot type revenue, so to speak. And it would have to be regenerated in the following fiscal year, either through expenditure savings or revenues over budget. So by lowering this number, you've actually helped yourself going forward, because you're not relying to a great extent on taking money from your savings account to balance the budget, which a lot of municipalities are doing in this economic climate right now. So what that leaves you is the whole about $3 million in undesignated fund balance. So you're in really an excellent financial position, given all the economic issues that all municipalities are going to be facing, whether it's state aid cuts or other things that are going on, retirement system increases, health insurance increases, all the things you have to deal with, labor, contractual agreements and the like. So you're really in a strong position to be able to deal with that and to be able to keep your tax levies without having to have spikes in them and different things that people don't want, obviously. So you're really in a good position with that. So that concludes what I was going to say about the general fund. I would certainly take any questions that anybody might have.
A couple of questions right off the bat, and the first is obviously you may not be able to shed too much light on this, given the fact that it requires a crystal ball, but we have this roughly 60% anticipated increase in pension contributions this year. As I understand it, the State Comptroller DiNapoli has floated a white paper that suggests that the contributions to uniform and non-uniform pension funds might have to spike dramatically beyond that over the next 10 years. You have a sense for the likelihood of that?
I'm not an actuary, certainly. I don't want to be. They rival us in excitement.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I think you have the edge on.
It's very exciting.
I mean, we've seen
the actuaries and the accountants
you're
together.
good.
It's riveting, right? But basically, they're thinking that the rates are going to move towards the more long-term rate nature. In other words, for example, like on the ERS, I think they consider the long-term rate to be about a 15% contribution, employer contribution, 15% of payroll.
Up from the current 7.5, soon to
From
go
the
to
current,
12.
soon to be 11 or
Right.
12. I
And
think
then
over
likely
time
to
it's 15. Right. I mean, that's what I believe they kind of feel, at least on ERS. I'm not so sure on police and fire is a little higher, because they work a shorter working span to get their benefits. So, we've had a lot of years where the rates have been very low because, unlike you who are not allowed to invest in the stocks and the bonds and the mutual funds, they are. And so they lost
Right.
all the money
Not
like we
that
all
I'm
did.
looking to be risky, but it's worth noting that the guys that tell us we can't don't apply the same rules to themselves, right?
Right. So those funds obviously lost a significant amount of value, and the actuaries are required to make sure that the assets of those funds get built back up to what's actuarially required, which of course I can't speak to. So the only way they can get that is from us, from the taxpayers and from the local municipalities. So my guess is that because the rates have been so low for so long, when it was booming, we probably have to go a little bit the other way now so that it ends up at whatever the median is. So I don't think you're going to see the rates coming down anytime soon. I mean, they're probably going to go up. And I believe the way they do it is they use some type of smoothing average. I'm getting into stuff I'm not
there's an
overly familiar with.
amortization offer. And
But, so I think the good years are, from years ago are coming off the table, and now the bad years are coming into the table, over like a 3 or 5 year smoothing average. So they're going to have to adjust for that. They may allow you different financing techniques to pay for this, like they did a few years ago when they first raised rates a few years ago, and they allowed you to say, all right, just pay like a minimum amount and then finance the rest of your payment over 10 years. This village did not do that, fortunately, because you're paying interest and doing all those things. But those are some options that, may be out there. I don't know if they will offer those options, but, it's definitely an issue.
Another question to ask, and it's a question we ask annually, about the appropriate level of fund balance for a village of this scale to be operating. I mean, we're now north of 25% of our general fund, and obviously in the times we confront, that's feeling like a comfortable, cautious, good place to be.
Right.
And yet, that is beyond the average in terms of fund balance. Is that fair to say?
Well, I mean, again, each place is unique.
Right.
I mean, if you talk to Moody's or S&P, they want you to probably have 100%. So, but you also obviously have to weigh, the taxpayers' needs and your needs. What you need to do on a long-term basis, dealing with the things that are happening, now, economically speaking. We don't know, how quickly sales taxes will rebound. Like I said, they were down for you from last year by about 7 or 8%. We don't know where the mortgage tax will be. We don't know where interest, earnings are going to be. So those are going to be drags on your revenue side of the budget, while your expenditure side of the budget continues to grow, either because of contractual agreements that you have with your employees, or the outside forces of retirement system contributions and health contributions and the like. So, you're in a position to be able to deal with that and have the resources to weather this storm, whether it lasts another year or two. You have that ability right now, so as not to have big spikes in property taxes to maintain your services. I mean, that'll be the balance that you folks have to strike, with the level of service that you provide. That would be really what I would say on that.
And in the end, I mean, the other thing that is interesting to look at is the dynamics of the other funds, especially the water fund, since that has been a net generator to us. Are you in a position to just give us a 1 minute on that?
Yeah, I mean, the
Page
water
53?
fund, sure, yeah, the water fund appears, the income statement for the water fund appears on page 53. And basically, the water fund, as you could see in the top part, the revenue sources, primarily obviously the water charges to the residents, total about $2.9 million in the actual column. And your expenses, as you can see, your actual operating expenses are about $2 million. And then there are transfers out, mostly to the debt service? Debt in general. Mostly to debt service. That's what's on that bracketed line for transfer out. Mostly to debt service to fund debt service related to water, infrastructure type items. And the rest of the money in there is money that, you're right, is sent back to subsidize, in essence, the general fund. Some can look at that as the money you're giving back to the general fund is offsetting some of the costs that are really being incurred in the general fund. So you have, for example, the accounting staff is taking care of water stuff, but, they're charged in the general fund. So it's almost like a reimbursement of some, overhead, type cost is what's coming back as like a subsidy to the general fund. But overall, as you could see at the end of the year, your fund balance here was diminished, but it went from $880 to about $697,000. And that's what you have available. And if you go back to page 52, you'll see that you've actually utilized, towards the bottom of 52, you utilized $420,000 in balancing the 9-10 budget that you're in. So you have free and clear fund balance within the water fund of about $237,000 right now to end the fiscal '09 year.
Although a reduction in revenues from '08 to '09 and an increase in expenses, so that fund has
Taking a hit.
taken a hit.
That's taken a hit, right. So, that may mean if the fund balance ultimately is not in this fund, that subsidy to the general fund may end up having to get reduced, or you'd have to look at, water rates and things like that as to what you're
Yeah.
charging versus,
Right.
what the costs are. Yeah, right.
Anybody else have any?
I'm always curious, the level of debt of the village and the level of debt of the water fund, both, there's probably going to be some incurred debt increases for both this year, potentially, certainly in the water fund. Any comment on relative size, and how much room we have to grow the debt side of the equation before we start getting, in territories where you would deem it to be oversized?
Well, I don't know if I'm the one to say, because I don't know your needs and your infrastructure needs. I could just tell you that page 36 and 37, page 36 shows you on the top of, the bottom chart, the first line, bonds. You started the year with about $20 million in bonds. This is all bonds, water and everything, and you paid down about 1.7, so you're down to $18.4 million in outstanding indebtedness. The bonds are listed on the top chart on page 37, and that gives you a breakdown of when they were issued, what they were originally issued for, when they mature, and the interest rates on them. And then the bottom chart is what's really important, because that's the amounts you have to budget, is based on that debt and that debt alone before you issue anything else. These are your annual debt service requirements, requiring you to budget these amounts within your budgets, between water fund and general fund, whatever the breakdown is. So you could see that for the year that you're currently in now, you have a $2.2 million obligation, and you could see for the next 5 years it's pretty steady at that $2 to $2 million range. So that's what you have to keep in the budget. Obviously, anything new that you decide to issue, you will have to see what the debt service impact of that is, and what that would mean, to the taxpayers. How much does that add to the tax burden?
But
So,
from an accounting point of view, your municipal accounting point of view, you're looking at a figure there of 2.2 million. That's roughly 20% of our entire budget. Is that high to you?
Well, it's 20% of your general fund budget,
Sorry.
but you're also factoring in the water fund.
A big
and
chunk of that bonding
Pool
is
fund.
from the water.
Refuse. So you have these other funds that you have to take
So
their
that figure
pieces as
roughly,
well.
where does that go down to? I mean, if you figure out what that is, do you think that that figure is too high, too low, about right?
That I really couldn't speak to, because, like I said, I have communities that have, less debt than this, and ones that have tremendously more than this, as a percentage of their budget. I think you really have to look at, like you're saying, what the debt service is as a percent of not just the general fund budget, but your overall, budget. I would generally say that I do see like debt service running in the 7 or 8 or 9% of the overall budget, of total appropriations and what the budget is. So, if this is within that, overall. But again, it's hard to say. You may have more infrastructure needs than the next community. You may have stuff that's, 100 years old, and they may be newer. So it's really hard to say. It's going to be a matter of, what can the taxpayers bear also? And, like I said, what the impact would be, if you're going to issue, $1 million, what's the debt service impact of that, per each $1 million that you issue? And what's the tax levy impact of that debt service?
Further, I mean, it's a bit of a ways off, but virtually or 70% of this debt is retired by 2022. So 12 years down the road, we have the potential to be in a circumstance with quite a bit less indebtedness pending the capital expense we confront in between now and then.
Well, 2022 is, you can do the math, but that is a long time away. So, what are you going to issue in the next?
Not that it's a long time away, although it's closer than it looks.
Right. Right.
You done with that, John?
The only other question I had is the amount of revenue decrease that we experienced from state aid, outside revenue. What was, I'm just trying to pull it off here,
Yep.
what that amount
Sure.
was.
Yeah, if you go to, it'll be a little more clear if you go to pages 46 and 47,
That's what I was
which
trying
is
to
which
find
is a little detail.
Yeah.
So you see in the third column in is the actual for this year, and then the last column is comparing, to last year. So if you go down, for example, into like the third group that says non-property taxes, and the first item, non-property tax distribution from county, that's the sales tax.
Yeah.
So you can see it was 918 this year versus 999 last year. So that's that 8% or so drop that I talked about. But everybody obviously experienced a similar drop. And then if you go down, the first item on page 47, under use of money and property, the earnings on investments, that's that interest earnings. This year you see you earned $59,000. Previous year, $150, almost $100,000 less, two-thirds less than last year. And then if you go down into the state aid section on 47, and the second line is the mortgage tax, $102,000 this year, $170,000 last year. That, again, is the 30 to 40% that everybody experienced as a drop in mortgage tax. But because it's not a significant portion of your budget, as you can see, like the per capita aid, you only get $55,000 of state aid.
Right. Well,
There's sort of a blessing. There's nothing.
It's a
they can
blessing
take
and a
away.
curse.
Well, it is.
You know.
Where I was going with that, though, is for the perspective of looking at fund balance as a way to gap or to get us through, the next couple of years if they're going to be bad. Pertinent to the comment you made earlier, which is you can't rely. If those revenues don't come back, you can't rely on your fund balance to carry you through because it's a one-shot deal. So
It would eventually
So
run
to
out,
the
yeah.
degree that what we should be looking at are some of these revenues coming back to more historical standards, it gives you a sense of, maybe we can anticipate a couple $100,000 of revenue coming back if the economy gets back on its heel
Right.
or back on its feet. Maybe not, but the use of the fund balance as a panacea to solve woes, even though we've got a nice fund balance, should be used in the with that in mind. Is that
We
a
say
fair?
judiciously, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, it really should, because, it's a savings account, and, if you continue to deplete it, eventually there is nothing left. So you have to be very careful each year as you budget that you're realistic on revenue expectations. Obviously, certain things that happened this year, are these were like once in a lifetime, hopefully, events
We
that
hope, yes.
happened, last year. Nobody could have anticipated that. So, unless, I don't know, maybe somebody could have. Fortunately, like I say, or unfortunately, most of your budget comes from property taxes.
Right, but the expenses that were the potential expenses that we're looking at, we'll live with for perpetuity. Those aren't
Yes.
going back down.
Those are not going back down for a while now.
So you have to look at that relative to. Unfortunately, that's the hands that we're dealt. The revenues, maybe we get some revenues back over
Right.
time.
It's a definite that certain of the expenses that I spoke of are going up.
Right.
That's pretty definite. When the revenues are going to start going back up, nobody knows. And obviously, when you're preparing a budget, you need to be conservative.
Right.
And to ensure that you don't get caught short and come out, remember I said before, you came out $650,000 better than budget. You still had a small loss for the year, but compared to what you'd budgeted, you still came out $650 to the good. If it starts going where it's not a small loss, but it's a bigger loss, and you deplete that fund balance, then going forward, you won't have it
Right.
to be able to do things, and then you can get into that spike kind of thing with tax rates and those kinds of things.
I mean, interesting thing to think about as we go forward and see what the results are of the current fiscal year, where
Right.
we've identified $230,000 of fund balance as a contribution to the current budget, as opposed to the previous fiscal year where we identified 676, but didn't actually use most of it.
Correct.
Is that we're now substantially less reliant to balance the budget in fund balance, but may or may not achieve the results we achieved last year and the year before, where we identified a big slice of fund balance, and then because the results of operations far exceeded our budget, didn't use it.
Correct.
So, I mean, it will be interesting and important as we confront what is inevitably going to be a tough budget year next year, that clearly there's, at least in the last 2 completed fiscal years, has been quite a bit of space in the current budget, sort of protective, cautionary space. So we may have reduced that flexibility in the current fiscal year, and it will be important to watch that as it progresses.
Correct.
So, I had one more question, and that was, you give us, as you always do, a management letter and identify what I would take to be a
I'm going to let Rob handle that. I did all the talking. I got to let him do some. Go ahead.
Welcome, sir.
He does all the work here, by the way. I mean, your people do all the work, but he does all the audit work. So I want to get that on the record.
Welcome. You've given us a management letter that identifies, as you always do, issues that could be addressed and aspects of our operation we want to think about. And I would adjudge it to be a pretty clean report.
Right.
One question I had was, in the Village Justice Court, you've commented this in the past, we're carrying this big theoretical asset of $800 and some thousand in parking tickets,
Right.
even though it's highly unlikely that some of the oldest ones will ever be paid. So what's your advice about that?
Well, these don't appear on your report.
And we're not carrying it as an asset.
Exactly.
Right.
We're just making a note that someone should pursue this. There's fines out there, that violations that could be a potential, revenue source for the Corps. It doesn't appear on your statement, though.
And at the point at which we decide to write them off, we write them off really just as an administrative task, not as an accounting task.
Right.
And is that assets of this kind are never counted on one's accounting in the government world?
Exactly. For justice courts, these are not.
Right.
These are just book entries, so to speak.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, this stuff is on a cash basis.
Yeah.
So whatever comes in is what's recognized, because the court will collect it and remit it over to the village,
And-
your share. And the state gets
Right.
its share, and then you get your share.
And you've commented, as you have at some, I think, in past years as well, about a small court operation depriving us of the segregation of duties that would normally be provided in a bigger operation, and so that's something we'll have to
Right.
wrap
It's a
our heads
cost
around
benefit.
to see if there's a means by which we can achieve that in the context of a small department.
Right.
So, anybody else have anything? I thank you all. Very much appreciate your coming and appreciate your clear and concise trip through this fat document. And Mary and Pam, I think you're the ones that have driven these positive results all year long and keep our numbers in order in ways that we only dreamed they might be not too many years ago. And so an awful lot of thanks go to Mary Schwartz and Pam Hoffman for running a tight ship in exactly the place you need a tight ship. So.
That's right.
Yeah, the management letter was as clean as I've ever seen it.
Yeah.
So.
Definitely.
Thank you.
Moving on, moving
Thanks,
on.
good.
Those bank recs, I kind of got to the point where I kind of got warm and cozy with the bank recs. Sorry to see them go. You were like,
Thank you.
warm milk.
See, you never get these kind of laughs with actuaries.
Right. No, you don't.
I was going to say, you guys, you got
They don't really speak English.
They're just deadpan.
Yeah.
All right.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you. Whoops, yeah.
Thank you all. I do think that the takeaway that residents might want from that, first off, let me ask, firstly, Patty, can we get at least the summary pages of the audit up on the web, so anybody who might want to take a look at it can download it and enjoy it as bedtime reading? If you're an insomniac, have we got a cure for you? But I do think that the takeaway from it is that the village is in a very stable financial position, and certainly that's something that we have inherited from previous boards. Bernie Gordon, our previous mayor, happens to be here tonight, and the results of this fiscal year are largely results on his watch. So I think residents can take comfort in the fact that we have not only substantial fund balance that will assist us in weathering the storms that are gathering on the horizon, but at the same time we have results here that show that we have substantially exceeded the results anticipated in our budget for several years running. So that's certainly good news. It reflects conservative budgeting, but it also reflects good management and a spirit of cooperation on the part of the department heads that we will be depending on at a greater level in the year to come. So I think that's certainly good news for the village and a compliment to the staff. Unless we can think of something else to say on that
Just wanted
subject.
to say, we are almost 6 months into our current fiscal year, and we are on budget in every area.
Great. So,
Comfortable feeling.
right, that certainly is. And one of the things I'd like to do is schedule at a
A work session.
work session and then follow up with a public session, sort of a brief update on where we stand on the current fiscal year, because it certainly is the time at which we should start addressing some of the things we know. For example, this $300 and some thousand hit we're going to confront on the pension side, and be starting to think about the implications of that. Further, the current fiscal year had a few if-then statements about what we would do with staffing and some other expenses in the second 6 months of the fiscal year, and I think we have some decisions to make about that as well. So.
I'm pushing you on here.
What are you having? The Yankees have already won.
No,
We
no,
don't-
Just trying to move you on. These guys want to go home.
All right. Let's move ahead to the resolutions. Steve, 206.
Resolved, the pre-check register dated November 9, 2009, covering check numbers 64759 through 64959, has been reviewed, and they are hereby approved as listed below. General Fund, $187,845.79. Miscellaneous Revenue Fund, $2,114.99. Water Fund, $21,880.85. Capital Fund, $138,633.86. Refuse Fund, $13,937.56. Pool Fund, $4,576.83. Trust and Agency, $5,165.50, for a total of $374,155.38.
Is there a second?
Second.
Comments, questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion approved. Indeed.
Resolved that the Board of Trustees has reviewed the minutes of the meetings held on Monday, October 26th, and they are hereby approved. I don't know how you made it through this meeting without me.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any comments or corrections?
We made it to the meeting without it.
It wasn't as fun, I am sure.
Much faster, though. She's complaining about speed, but all in favor?
Aye.
Motion approved. Jonathan, 208.
Resolved, the Board of Trustees of the Village of Pleasantville hereby authorizes the village clerk to notice a public hearing for Monday, November 23rd, at 8 p.m. prevailing time, 80 Wheeler Avenue, New York, to hear comments as it pertains to local law amending Chapter 21, changing the residency requirements of certain court employees as follows. Section 1, in accordance with the Municipal Home Rule Law, Section 10, the Village of Pleasantville has resolved to supersede the State of New York Public Officers Law 3.8 regarding residency requirements for persons appointed to positions in towns, villages, and cities outside of New York City, which mandates that such appointees must reside within the municipality of the court to which they are appointed in Section 2, Chapter 21 of the Code of the Village of Pleasantville regarding officers and employees is hereby amended to add a new Article 4 as follows. Article 4, appointed employees. Section 21-6, residency requirements for the clerk. The village clerk need not reside in the incorporated limits of the Village of Pleasantville, but must reside in the state of New York, and also that the village clerk attendants need not reside within the incorporated limits of the Village of Pleasantville, but must reside in the state of New York.
Is there a second?
Second.
Patty, you want to just
Yeah, sure.
put that in fewer
Public
words?
offices law, really, since we are creatures of the state of the village, we're still subject to a lot of state law. And public offices law said that once you are chartered as a municipality, certain officers must be residents of your municipality, and they would be everything from my position to the village clerk, to the treasurer, building inspector, superintendent of public works. But over time, needs change and communities, change. So the village exempted all of us at one point in time as people got hired and no longer had to live within the village. Our previous court clerk lived in the village, so we never addressed that position. When we hired our current court clerk, the county flagged this during a certified payroll and said, oh, it's subject to public offices law, so you're going to have to do the exemption. And then recently we hired 2 part-time court officers. Neither of them live in the village, and they are subject to public offices law. So it's a little bit of a quirk with the intergovernmental relationship here, but it's not unusual. Almost every community exempts these positions now because they want to be able to have a broader talent pool to choose from, and it's just that easy to do. You do it by local law.
In fact, it begs the question, what other New York state laws can we supersede?
Right. Yeah, I know.
Come up with a list.
I think
I
Tree
have a
cutting.
whole list. Start with pension.
All right.
Working on it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion approved.
Brian.
Meet Brian.
Resolved.
2000. No, it's 2009. Steve has one. 209, I'm sorry.
Resolved that the Board of Trustees of the Village of Pleasantville hereby accepts the donation from Lisa Borodowski in the amount of $300 for senior programs at the Clinton Street Center.
Is there a second?
Second. That's very nice of Lisa.
Thank you very much, Lisa Bardowski, for that contribution. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion approved. Okay, Steve,
Summarized.
number 210.
I believe at 210 we can jump to the resolve portion on the second
Yeah.
page. Do we need to go through all these whereas? Be it resolved that the Board of Trustees of the Village of Pleasantville hereby approves the entering into a license agreement between the Eyes of More Ltd. DBA Lucy's Martini Lounge in the Village of Pleasantville, and further resolved that Lucy's shall provide the village with copies of all necessary insurance coverages and will otherwise comply with all the requirements of said license, and be it further resolved that the mayor on behalf of the Board of Trustees is authorized to execute such license agreement on behalf of the village.
Second.
We are, by way of background, Lucy's Lounge, which is adjacent to Village Hall, across the street at the corner of Bedford Road and Wheeler Avenue, is in the process, and I believe actually has completed the process at the Planning Commission for approval to build an addition on the back of the building. They're expanding that business, and as I understand it, adding, among other things, a restaurant function so they'll be able to serve food. In the course of that, they have come to us and are seeking an easement agreement that would allow them to use the property on the parking lot side of the building for some staging work as they build this project, but have also identified that the existing building encroaches upon village land by 4 inches. And so the easement agreement that is proposed here has been drafted and worked on by the attorney for Lucy's Lounge, and worked on also by our village attorney Joel Sachs at Keenan Dean, and we are in possession of a memo from Joel outlining the terms of it and recommending that so long as the spirit of it is consistent with our expectations, that he believes that the village's interests are satisfactorily protected. So
Steve might as well read the whole thing.
you're just trying to get out of here, you know? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion approved.
That's me. So I
Ms.
can jump to here
Berard.
too.
Up to you.
Yes.
I can, right? Motion made by trustee, pardon me. Now therefore be it resolved, the Village Board of Trustees hereby issues a negative declaration pursuant to the State Environmental Quality Review Act in granting the proposal license agreement.
Is there a second?
Second.
Again, on the advice of our council, we're issuing this resolution to have in the record a determination under the State Environmental Quality Review Act that the action we're taking does not have a substantial effect on the environment.
And it's the short form.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion approved.
Thank you.
Thanks, David.
It's a good presentation, David.
That's right. The attorney for Lucy's has been relieved of his need to stay.
I just come to watch the music.
That's right. You're welcome anytime. Please come anytime. You never know. Number 212, John.
Resolved that the Board of Trustees of the Village of Pleasantville hereby authorizes the village administrator to retain the services of Robert Ponzini from the law firm of Gaines, Gruner, Ponzini, and Novick, 1 North Broadway, White Plains, New York, as special counsel with respect to cable franchise agreement negotiations.
Is there a second?
Second.
Those of you who have been watching us almost at any point over the last several years will recall that we've been in the long, twisted, torturous negotiation with Verizon regarding their interest in coming to the Village of Pleasantville with a cable TV franchise. We are now in possession of a draft contract from Verizon that establishes financial terms that Verizon has indicated are its final offer. We provided this contract to Rob Ponzini, who we are authorizing in this resolution to look over and review for the purposes of assessing all the other aspects of the contract. Our regular village attorney, Joel Sachs, works for Keenan Bean, and Keenan Bean represents Verizon in other matters, and therefore is conflicted from representing us against Verizon in this particular matter. As an aside, unrelated to the resolution, we are cautiously optimistic that Verizon will agree to the changes we have proposed in the contract, and we will be able to post it for public hearing within the next several weeks, at which point its terms can be made public and everyone will have an opportunity to weigh in. So, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion approved. 213, John. Right.
Resolved that the Board of Trustees of the Village of Pleasantville hereby appoints Bernard Gordon to the Ethics Board effective November 9, 2009, for a term to expire April 2011.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Bernie Gordon, our former mayor, who's in the room right now. We are delighted that you've accepted the offer to serve on the Ethics Committee, and we sincerely hope we will have very little use for your services. We'll find some other good way to use your services. Hopefully this won't be it, but reassuring to know that you're ready to assist in this matter.
Did we lose somebody on the Ethics Board? Or
Well,
is this
Jonathan Blackman had been
that's
a
right.
member, and he is now
In London.
most of the time in London, I think. So.
Is the Ethics Board the pasture to which all former mayors go to?
Usually, that's true, they do.
It's their ticket to the VIP dinner.
There you go.
How many people, how many members are there of the Ethics Board?
Gigi Collins is still on it, right? No?
John Nolan?
There's only 3.
John and Albert.
Oh,
Okay.
so you're right, it is the
Our
past.
two most recent mayors are members of the Ethics
So you
Committee.
could have a split vote and somebody could be neither ethically or unethically appropriate.
Did we vote all in favor?
Yes, we did.
Aye.
Thanks, Bernie.
Thank you very much, Bernie.
Bernie.
Resolution 214, Steve.
You get the numbers, you're the numbers man.
Yeah, boy. This could be a tongue twister. Resolved, the Village Board of Trustees hereby authorizes the village attorney to proceed with the settlement of certiorari petition by Commons of Pleasantville as follows. Assessment years 2003, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Original assessments in all years of $387,500. Proposed assessments of $358,200, $345,450, $344,350, $314,900, $301,700, and $301,700 for those years consecutively, with assessment reductions from 2003 to 2008 of $29,300 in the first year, $42,050, $43,150, $72,600, $85,800, $85,800 for the various years in order. And further resolved, the village treasurer is authorized to issue the applicable refunds to the petitioner's attorney upon receipt of an executed order from the court. I don't see a total here of what all these numbers add up to. Do you know what that is offhand?
Mary did the calculations, the applicable
Oh, I'm sorry, it's on
refund.
the attachment?
That's okay, yeah. And
Okay.
it took us a while
Yes.
to sort it out, but it's $24,000. Right,
$24,766.
$766.
More than that, first year.
That covers all
No,
years.
That's the reduction in
That's
the
the-
assessment,
that's
that's not
the-
the reduction in the
Oh,
taxes.
gotcha.
Right,
That's the tax refund,
right, total.
24,000.
So the total tax refund is
Right.
$24,766.
766.
Reflecting the years 2003
07.
through 2008.
Right.
So shouldn't that be in this resolution? It's
I
not
would make
clear
note of it.
what the,
Well,
What the-
the resolution is to amend the assessment rules.
Assessment rule, right.
but it's
And
also the
issue the
second
refunds,
resolution
yeah.
is the village treasurer is authorized to issue the applicable refunds.
Right.
I would say total, you're right.
In the
totally.
amount-
So we should have in the amount of,
$24,766.07, right? I
Right.
think that's right. Good
That's
point,
fine.
Steve.
Harry, do we have a reserve for this, or is this an unbudgeted item? Or
We were carrying reserves for several years, and they were just lapsing into fund balance because these carried on for so many years. And the decision in the current budget was to fund them out of fund balance. Because we artificially raise taxes every year in anticipation of these things being settled, and they were never settled.
Gotcha.
So this is fun, going forward, all surcharges are, although some minor, we have some minor reserve, but all will be fund balance appropriated.
Gotcha.
Now, tell me again why it is that we know it's coming. They come to us, in this case, for 6 consecutive years. They register whatever that they have to do. Well, why is it that we can't settle early on, or is it that we don't want to? Why do we wait for 6 years so that the amount is $24,000?
Well, first of all, the action is an action taken by the property owner, not so much the village in terms of compelling, the matter to go to court. But we've also, the board's taken a position over time that it's, better to negotiate from a position of strength over time, because the economy is so volatile. The real estate economy is volatile. And one year you can see a drastic reduction when the next year, you may be able to recoup some of it. So you get a better average over time. You also get to hold their money.
Where is
You get to hold their money until such time as the court
Although-
orders you to pay it back. So
Although
you're
now
getting
that we're
some
not
interest.
making any interest on it.
Well, you are. You're also,
Well, further, I think in the end...
it's always been,
My sense of it is that the spirit of the board at this point is obviously, consistent with our legal obligations to move these things along and not let them hang along quite as long as we have. We've changed counsel for certiorari matters, and I think have, correct me if you see it differently, encouraged them to clear out some of the older matters, resolve them, and move forward with a cleaner slate.
to the extent they can, yes, particularly the larger
Right.
certiorari.
Is there a limit to the number of years they can file for? I thought it was
I've seen
5.
8. I've seen 8
Well, they
be the
can't file backwards, but
Yeah.
from the
Right,
point
but
at which
from the
they
time
file.
that they
right.
file, can they file? I thought there was somehow a limit.
I don't know. I can find that out. But I've seen them.
Well, these are just years that
File up
accumulated
there.
from the point of the grievance.
Yes.
It's
Don't
not
they
that
have
they
to file
filed, they
every
didn't
year?
file for all these years. They filed
no,
in
no,
2003, and therefore the grievance affected the years that followed.
Okay.
No, they filed every year.
Right.
They filed in.
They have to
I-
file every year,
You
though.
can't
Yeah.
file for years that have already passed, is my point.
Right.
That's right.
Right, but they're coming in every year and filing.
Right.
Right.
That's right.
where is this property?
It's the
It's on
Commons
Manville Road.
Co-op apartment building in Manville Road near the Rebecca Lane
Big
lot.
white
So
building.
you're right, it's the white one.
Yeah.
Right. All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Second?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion approved. 215.
Resolved that the Board of Trustees of the Village of Pleasantville hereby suspends the parking meter fees for the time allowed on 1-, 2-, and 3-hour meters from December 5th through 2009 through December 28th, 2009 for the holiday season.
Is there a second?
Second.
These dates, December 5 through December 28, reflect the discussion that we've had with the Chamber of Commerce and the local businesses. They requested that the free downtown parking begin December 5 because that is the date of the holiday downtown sales. And some years we have had free parking for a shorter period of time. The merchants are nearly unanimously of the view that it benefits them. It's important to realize that although you don't have to pay for parking during that time period, the time limits still apply. So if you're in a 1-hour parking space, you're only allowed to be there for 1 hour, and we expect you to move, and the parking enforcement officers will be enforcing that. So, any other comments? Brian, you always have a comment on this annually.
Annually, I vote against this.
No, I don't think that's true. You usually vote for it after you complain.
This year, I'll be voting for it, Mr. Mayor.
All right, all,
I'm converted.
all in favor?
Aye.
Motion
All right,
approved.
Brian.
Jonathan? Jonathan?
Yes.
Is that right? Yes.
Resolved that the Board of Trustees of the Village of Pleasantville hereby approves the Village of Pleasantville's credit card policy.
Is there a second?
Second.
Patty, you want to describe this?
Yeah, this is, this has been initiated by the Finance Department. As you know, we talked about getting better control over vendor accounts, and we currently have credit cards issued to several departments, particularly Recreation and the Senior Center, where a lot of times they just can't purchase on our cycle because of programs and ticket requirements and ShopRite and other things that need to be, purchased. So the Finance Department, through collaboration with Chase Bank, actually discovered a new product that's more of a debit card than a credit card. It sets a pre-limit on cards for department heads to use, and has really restricted authorization on what types of expenditures could be made on those cards. And this is really just a matter of a best practice to have a policy in place where the employees who have access to these cards know what the guidelines are and what their responsibilities are. In fact, there was something written up recently in the Journal News about a school district that had trouble with not having a policy.
Right. So,
So we've had this. We went over this in draft, I think, about a month ago with the board. We got the cards in, and we're happy. It provides a better control environment.
so this is a two-page document that describes general policy guidelines, the responsibilities of the treasurer and the deputy treasurer, the responsibility of the card holder who is issued this card, the procedures for lost or stolen credit cards, and then a list of appropriate use of cards, which indicate also acts that would be violations of policy. So clearly, especially given the fact that as we have recently read in the press, a number of entities have been identified as having had inadequate controls over credit cards, or perhaps no difficulties but no policy behind them. We're looking to make sure our ducks are in a row.
Right.
Thank you for that.
And the cards on individual names are kept in the safe upstairs. Nobody carries their card. They have to request them. They have to request a limit because they have zero balance all the time. So they're only charged up to a certain limit if we know
Right.
people are going on a conference or needing something to do. So we don't have that type of exposure that we have a $10,000 card out like we do now. So I think it was more appropriate for us to work
Right.
this way.
My card only had a dollar on it. And I
Put a dollar on Judy's
and I
card.
put it in the Journal News that it required a credit card, so I went to Mary and she actually, raised the limit just to put that into the Journal. So
Yeah.
very, very tight control.
You
And
sound
I
like
handed
my
it back to her and it was locked in the safe.
sounds like my daughter calling from college. I'm standing at the cash register at Target.
$1.
The card only has 11 cents. All right, I thank you for that. Thank you to Mary and Pam for having put together the program for that as well. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion approved. Ryan.
Resolved that the Board of Trustees of the Village of Pleasantville hereby authorizes the village clerk to notice a public hearing for Monday, November 23rd, 2009, 8:00 p.m. prevailing time, 80-wheeler, to hear comments as it pertains to a local law amending Chapter 173, Vehicles and Traffic, Section 173-63, Schedule 15, Parking Prohibited, certain hours as follows. This would be for West Cora Avenue on both sides. Parking would be prohibited from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. From Pleasantville Road to Spring Street. Is that on weekdays only, Patty, or is that every
Yes.
day?
Weekdays.
That's Monday
Yes,
through
Monday
Friday.
through Friday.
Right.
We'll put that in hours and days.
Yes.
Thank you.
Is there a second?
Second.
This arises because a number of residents on West Cora Avenue have come to us and indicated that all-day commuter parking has become a problem for them on their street. We already have parking rules in place on a number of streets that are near the central business district to try to control that, because there are quite a number of people who are interested in parking, particularly free parking on residential streets, if they can get close enough to the train station. So this is a public hearing. Anybody who feels one way or the other is invited to contact, to either attend or call in Monday, November 23 at 8 p.m. To comment on whether it's appropriate to do this or not. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion approved. Steve?
Resolved that the Board of Trustees of the Village of Pleasantville, based upon the recommendation of the police chief, hereby approves the assignment of police officer Arthur Glass to the position of detective effective November 9, 2009, at a salary of $98,334. Said appointment is subject to a probationary period of not less than 12 weeks to a maximum of 72 weeks.
Is there a second?
Second.
This reflects some internal decisions about the deployment of our existing police staff. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion
Aye.
approved. Any further comments of any subject? I'm going to hold you up again, Mindy. I'm sorry to report. I just had two other things I wanted to mention, and that
You're
is
not holding me up.
I have
No place to go.
two things I just wanted to report, and one is that October 31st was the deadline we had established for requests for proposal for the purchase and adaptive reuse of the recreation center at Great Oak Lane and Bedford Road, and we do have in our possession a response to that, and we'll be talking in executive session about the terms of that offer and whether we're interested in pursuing it or not. Our request for proposal did not require us to sell the building. It simply gives us the opportunity to receive offers and decide whether they are in the village's interest at this point or not. We're in the process at the moment of spending a little money on that building, consistent with the advice of a building engineer, to make some improvements to make sure that it doesn't suffer any further decay. So we'll have more to say on that as our discussion about it continues. And then the last thing I wanted to comment is, those of you who have watched in the past may recall my mention that Stop and Shop has officially put the MLA property on the market, and they listed it with First Service Williams Commercial Brokerage. We received notice last week that the listing agents for that property have moved to a new firm, and the listing has gone with them. So if you drive by that property, there's a for sale sign up. The new company is Rhys, R-H-Y-S. Their contact information is on the sign that's posted on the property. I spoke to them last week, and they report that there has been significant interest in the property, perhaps a dozen or more potentially serious inquiries, and they're cautiously optimistic that a deal may be in place before too terribly long. So anyone who knows anybody who might be interested in contacting Rhys is encouraged to drive by, get that phone number, and be in touch. So there being no further business, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you all for watching. We look forward to seeing you. We have a work session next week, and then our regular meeting and our youth recognition night coming up in 2 weeks on Monday, November 23rd. Thank you all.